In this lesson, we're going to break down how to practice and connect minor triads across the neck. Minor triads are built just like major triads, except the third is lowered by one half step or one semitone. That single note change from a major third to a minor third completely transforms how the chord feels. So a C major triad has the note C, E, G, and C minor triad has the note C, E flat, G. In this module, we're going to be using the chords from the backing track I have provided. The chords will be F minor, G minor, C minor, then A flat major, B flat major, and a quick C7 sharp 9 as a passing chord. Don't worry so much about the passing chord for this module. Now these chords are a great example of how a minor and major colors can coexist inside one progression. Let's start by isolating each chord and we'll walk through all its inversions. F minor has the note F, A flat, C. Then a G minor has the note G, B flat, D. C minor has C, E flat, G. A flat major has A flat, C, then E flat. And a B flat major has B flat, D, and F. For this demo, I will start on the lowest fret possible for each chord. And this means I will not always start with the root position. If you want a simpler practice, I would say it's okay to keep it in the order of playing the root position, first inversion, then second inversion. Both are valid approaches. Once you have internalized each chord, start connecting them in the order of the backing track. Section A has the chord F minor, G minor, then a C minor, then G minor, finishing with C minor. Section B has A flat major into a C minor, then a B flat major into a G minor. Those four chords will repeat 3 rounds. Then the last round of section B has A flat major, the C minor, then a B flat major into a G minor with a C7 sharp 9 as a passing chord. This is going to help us turn around back into section A. Like I said, don't worry so much about the passing chord as this module's focus is on minor triads. When switching chords, always aim for the nearest note from one triad to the next. We'll call that voice leading, and it's what makes your transition sound smooth and natural. So here's the demo. I'm going to move across all the string set. I'll go through each chord individually first, then through the chord progression. Starting with F minor. That's my first inversion. Then here's second inversion. Then a root position. Then you could keep going towards the higher frets, but I'll just go ahead and keep it on the one set of octave. Okay, here is G minor. I'll start with first inversion, second inversion, and a root position. Here comes C minor triad, starting with root position, first inversion, second inversion. All right, that leads me to the major triads. I have the A flat major. I'll start with first inversion, second inversion, and a root position. Okay, then we have the B flat major. I'll start with the root position, first inversion, second inversion, so those cover all the chords individually. Now I'll go ahead and follow a chord progression. Let's start with section A. So the starting chord is F minor. So starting on the lowest fret possible here, I'll start with the first inversion F. Then the next is G minor. I'll use the same first inversion. Then a root position, C minor. Then to finish off, I have back to the G minor, first inversion. And then land back to C minor root position. So here's kind of with some groove. Okay, moving on to the next segment of the fretboard, I'll start with F minor, second inversion. G minor, second inversion. And a C minor, first inversion. And then turn back to the G minor, second inversion. And a C minor, first inversion. Here's with the groove. And moving on to the next spot, I'll start with F minor root position and a G minor root position, C minor, second inversion. Back to the G minor root position and a C minor, second inversion. Here's with the groove. So that covers all the section A chord progression. Then we have section B chord progression. I'll go ahead and return back to the lower fret, starting with A flat major. We have first inversion, then a close C minor will be a root position. Move into a B flat, I'll go up to the first inversion. Then a G minor will be a second inversion. Here's with the groove. And then the next segment of the fretboard, we have the A flat, second inversion. And a close C minor would be first inversion. Then we have a B flat, second inversion as well. And a G minor root position. Here's with the groove. And lastly, here is A flat major root position. C minor, second inversion. B flat root position. And a G minor, first inversion. Here's with the groove. Now for the passing chord, I'm gonna include a diagram of the chords I played in the backing track. There's two options here. One of them, you could imagine a Hendrix chord, is a C sharp, C7, sharp 9. One of them is this. And then the other option is this one. Feel free to play those over that quick passing chord change if you so desire. All right, moving on to string set number 2, I'm gonna demonstrate the same thing starting with individual chords. So let's start with F minor here. So starting with the lowest fret possible, I have the root position F minor. Then I have the first inversion F minor. Then I have the second inversion, F minor. And then we have the G minor. I'll go ahead and start with root position. First inversion, second inversion. Then we have the C minor. This one, I'll go ahead and start with first inversion with the open G string involved. Here is second inversion. And then root position. And then that first inversion without open string will be this. Then moving on to A flat major, we have just a bar basically on string DGB. And that will be second inversion. Here's root position, A flat major. And a first inversion, A flat major. And that leaves us with B flat major. I'll go ahead and start with a second inversion. This is also a bar on third fret on string DGB. Then here's the root position and a first inversion. All right, let me demonstrate moving through the chord progression, starting with section A. Here, I'll go ahead and start with the lower fret, starting with F minor, root position, then a G minor, root position, then a C minor with a second inversion. Here's with the groove. Okay, moving on to the F minor first inversion. I'll take this same shape to a G minor. Here's second inversion as well. And then finishing with C minor, root position. And with the groove. And lastly, here is F minor, starting with second inversion. G minor, second inversion as well. And then a C minor, first inversion. Here's with a groove. Okay, moving on to section B chord progression. Let me start all the way back on A flat with the lowest fret possible. So first fret, I am barring here. From here, the nearest C minor would be first inversion, I'm sorry. Then I'll move up to the B flat, second inversion. And then the G minor, root position. With the groove, we got something like this. Then we have the A flat, root position. Then a C minor, second inversion. And a B flat major, root position. Then we have the second inversion, a G minor. Let me clarify, that was the first inversion G minor. Here's with the groove. And moving on, here is A flat, starting with first inversion. Then a C minor would be a root position. Then B flat with the first inversion. Then we have the G minor with the second inversion. Here's with the groove. if you wanted to hit the passing chord, a nearby one would be right here. And that covers all the chords for string set number 2. Now moving on to string set number 3, which involves strings G, D, and A. I'll go through all the triads first, starting with F minor. Here is second inversion, root position, first inversion. For the first inversion, I do keep my first finger barring the D and G string. And sometimes it doesn't look like I am, but that's what I'm using. All right, moving on to the G minor triad. Here is second inversion, root position, then first inversion. This first inversion, if you wanted to play down an octave, it will have the first fret A, then open D and G string. Moving on to C minor triad, I'll start with the root position. This will have on the low octave an open G string. Then we have first inversion, then second inversion. Here comes the A flat major triad. I'll go ahead and start this with the first inversion. This one I'm using my first finger to bar D and G string first fret. Here is second inversion. And the root position. And lastly, I have the B flat major triad. I'll go ahead and start with first inversion, second inversion, root position. Now, following the chord progression, I'll start with F minor, second inversion, G minor, also second inversion, and a close by C minor, first inversion. Here's with the groove. Okay, moving on to the next segment of the fretboard, starting with F minor, root position. G minor, also root position. And a C minor, second inversion. Okay, here's with the groove. And lastly, I have the F minor with first inversion. G minor, also first inversion. Then a close by C minor would be a root position. Here's with the groove. All right, here comes section B, starting with A flat major. The lower frets I could play is first inversion. And the C minor would be a root position. Then B flat major, first inversion. Then a G minor would be a second inversion. Here's with the groove. Okay, moving on to the next segment of the fretboard, starting with A flat major, this would be a second inversion. And a C minor, first inversion. B flat, second inversion. And a G minor, root position. Here's with the groove. And lastly, we have the A flat major root position, C minor second inversion, then B flat also root position, and a G minor first inversion. Here's with the groove. And from here, if I wanted to finish with the passing chord, C7 sharp 9, I would probably play this voicing. But again, you could play the other one up here, or down low octave. Now that leaves me with my final string set number 4, which have strings D, A, E string. Here we go, starting with F minor, the lowest fretted F minor I could play. And this one would be a first inversion. Then here is second inversion. Then here is root position. Moving on to G minor. I'll start with the root position on this one. This one will have an open D string in it. First inversion. Second inversion. Moving on to C minor, I'll start with second inversion. Then a root position, and first inversion. Then we have A flat major, starting with root position, first inversion, second inversion. Then we have B flat major. This one I'll start with second inversion. If you play this down on the low octave, this will have an open D string. Then we have root position. Then first inversion. Let me follow through the chord progression, starting with section A. Here is F minor. I'll start with the lower frets. Here's first inversion F minor. Now the next one, the close by, is root position G minor with the open D string. But you could also play the first inversion G minor. But I'll imagine it as root position for this one. Then from there, I'll play C minor, second inversion. Here's with the groove. To make your guitar sound really growly, play voicings on those bass strings. Moving on, here is the next segment of the fretboard. I'll go ahead and start with first inversion F minor. And a close by G minor, I'll play first inversion. leaves me to C minor root position. Here's with the groove. And lastly, here is F minor root position. This time, I'll go ahead and choose to go over to the second inversion G minor. And finishing with first inversion C minor. Here's with the groove. And that covers section A. Now moving on to section B, I'll go ahead and start with A flat major, moving back down to the lower frets here, starting with the root position. A nearby C minor triad is second inversion. Then moving on to B flat major, second inversion. This is with the open D string involved. And a close by G minor will be a root position. Here's with the groove. That one sounds extra growly. I love it. Moving on to the next part of the fretboard, starting with A flat major, first inversion. And a C minor, root position. Then B flat, first inversion. And then finishing with second inversion, G minor. Here's with the groove. And lastly, here is A flat major, starting with the second inversion. And C minor, first inversion. Then a nearby B flat major would be a first inversion. But I feel like you could totally make sense of the second inversion there too, but I'll stay with first inversion. From here, the G minor would be, again, second inversion. Here's with the groove. A nearby passing chord, the C7 sharp 9, is really down under your fingers. So you could play that one right there. I want to make a note that there's not one clear answer sometimes. So this is where your style, your taste, your interpretation of the music really come into play. You have a lot of freedom to work around. So play around and experiment for yourself. That covers all the string sets playing minor triads horizontally. And I want to remind us, each string acts like a new rote across the fretboard. This will help you connect all your minor triad shapes. Now I'm going to move forward into playing triads vertically. We'll go through the chords individually, then we'll see if we could follow the chord progression. Here, let me remind us, I'll be referencing the cage system. Let me give us a heads up here. As I approach the vertical practice, I'm going to pick one starting position. Then, as I follow through the chord progression and exercise voice leading, which just means finding the nearby triad, you will end up in a different position of whatever the chord you're following. So just keep that in mind as you work this out yourself. This will help you really increase the awareness of the fretboard. Going through all the individual chords first, starting with F minor. I'll start with position 1, which have the D and C shape. Here I'm starting with second inversion. First inversion onto the next string set. then a root position onto the next string set, and finishing with second inversion, last string set. Moving on to position 2, which have the A and G shape. I'll start with root position. Moving up, that leads me to the second inversion. Moving up, I have first inversion. And lastly, I have the root position. And finally, here's position 3, starting with first inversion. Moving up, root position. Moving up, second inversion. And lastly, I have the first inversion. That covers all the positions for F minor. All right, let me do the same thing with G minor here. I'll go ahead and start with position 1, D and C shape. Starting with second inversion. Then I have the first inversion. Then the root position. Then the second inversion. Moving to position 2, I have the G minor, starting with root position. Then I have second inversion, then first inversion, then a root position. And lastly, here's position 3 for G minor, starting with first inversion, moving up, root position, moving up, second inversion, and lastly, first inversion. Here is C minor, starting with position 1. I have the second inversion, then first inversion, root position, then second inversion. Moving to position 2 for C minor triad, here is root position. Moving up, second inversion. Moving up, first inversion. And lastly, root position. Moving up the next position, here is C minor, first inversion. Moving up the next string set, root position. Moving up the next string set, second inversion. And moving up, first inversion. That covers all the minor triad shapes and positions. Now moving on to A flat major. Here again, the positions stay the same. You'll just have to imagine a major chord shapes. So let me walk us through position 1, second inversion, first inversion, then a root position, then a second inversion. Here comes position 2, starting with root position, moving up, second inversion, moving up, first inversion, and lastly, root position. And lastly, here is position 3, the E shape, starting with first inversion, moving up, root position, moving up, second inversion, and lastly, first inversion. That covers all the positions for A flat major triad. Here comes our last chord, B flat major triad, starting with position 1, starting with here, second inversion, moving up, first inversion, moving up, root position, and moving up, second inversion. Moving on to position 2 for B flat major triad. I'll go ahead and start with root position here. Let me play this actually on the lower fret. Moving up, we have the second inversion. Then we have the first inversion moving up. And finishing with root position. And here is position 3 for B flat major triad. Here it comes, first inversion, moving up, the root position. Then we have the second inversion. And lastly, first inversion. That covers all the triads that we're going to be using for this lesson. So now let me show you how I'm going to follow the chord progression using the triads. Just to walk you through my thought process here, I'm going to pick position 1 of the starting chord of each section. Then from there, I'm going to play through a round of the chord progression, just horizontally in that particular neighborhood. Then I'll go ahead and move up to the next string set, still thinking vertically, and then move up, and then move up. So it's kind of a blend of both vertical and horizontal. But let's dive in. So section A, I'm gonna start with F minor, position 1. That leads me to the second inversion. Now, nearby triad here, I'll choose to go first inversion, G minor triad. Then finish with C minor triad, root position. Here's with the groove. Okay, moving up to the next string set, I'll start with F minor, first inversion. Then I'll go down to the G minor, root position. Then we have C minor, second inversion. Here's with the groove. Moving on to the next string set, I'll start with F minor, root position. G minor as the second inversion. Then C minor as the first inversion. Here's with the groove. And lastly, here is the F minor triad and the upper string set, starting with second inversion. Then G minor, first inversion. And nearby C minor will be root position. Here's with the groove. That covers one particular neighborhood of the fretboard. The only thing I did was set a starting point. I picked position 1 for F minor for section A. All right, moving to section B, I'm gonna also pick position 1 for A flat major triad. And let's see if I could work through the voice leading starting with that position. So starting with A flat major, here's second inversion. Then the nearby C minor triad would be first inversion. Then a nearby B flat major triad could be a first inversion here. Then finishing with G minor triad, second inversion. Here's with the groove. Moving up to the next string set, I'm starting with A flat major triad, first inversion. Now the root position of C minor is really close by. Here is the next chord, a B flat major, also root position. Then first inversion of G minor triad is nearby. Here's with some groove. Okay, moving up to the next string set, I have A flat major playing on root position. A nearby C minor would be second inversion. And a nearby B flat could be the second inversion. And nearby G minor would be root position. Here's with some groove. Moving up to the last string set, I'll start with A flat major. Here is second inversion. A nearby triad of C minor will be a first inversion. Then a nearby B flat major will be a first inversion here. And close by G minor, second inversion. Here's with some groove. So that covers a particular part of the fretboard for section B. So now I'm gonna go back to section A. This time I'm gonna pick position 2 of F minor as my starting point, and let me see if I could exercise voice leading from there. Okay, let me start with F minor triad root position. Now here, my gut tells me that I could either go to a second inversion G major triad, or I could use the same shape to play the root position G minor triad. Now for this one, I want to explore a little bit more in the higher fret, so let me stick to the root position G minor triad. Now from here, a nearby C minor could be a second inversion. Here's with some groove. All right, moving up to the next string set, I have F minor. This is second inversion. Same idea here. I'll go ahead and use the same shape to play the G minor. And that That lands me with nearby C minor. This would be first inversion. Here's with some groove. All right, moving up to the next string set, I have first inversion F minor triad. Now from here, I'm gonna move towards the G minor root position. But you could totally use the same shape as A F minor, first inversion, and play up here. Here again, take the time to experiment for yourself. If you could do both ways, that's really ideal. But I'm gonna switch up to the root position G minor. That takes me to a nearby C minor triad. This would be second inversion. Here it is with the groove. And here's on to my last string set. I'm gonna start F minor triad on a root position. From here, I'll go ahead and move down to the second inversion G minor. But also a viable option is root position G minor triad here. Okay, now I'll go back to the second inversion G minor. From here, a nearby C minor triad would be first inversion. And now here's with some groove. And that covers a different neighborhood following through section A. I'm going to do the same thing to section B, starting with position 2 of A flat major triad. So that's going to lead me to root position A flat major triad. Now I'll close by C minor here, second inversion. Then we have the B flat major triad, a close one would be a second inversion. Then a G minor would be a root position. Here's with some groove. Moving up to the next string set, I have A flat major. I'm gonna use my ring finger as a bar on 13th fret. A nearby C minor triad would be first inversion. Then the nearby B flat major is a second inversion. First inversion. Then we have a nearby G minor. This would be a second inversion. Here's with a groove. All right, let me start with A flat major, first inversion. The next would be a C minor root position. Then move on to B flat root position. And nearby G minor would be first inversion. Here's with the groove. Moving up the next string set, starting with A flat major, root position. And C minor is second inversion. And then move into a B flat major, second inversion. And nearby triad for G minor will be root position. Here's with the groove. And that covers my second neighborhood of section B. All I did was, just to remind us, pick position 2 for my starting chord, and from there I work my way through. And that leaves us with kind of our last neighborhood. Going back to section A, I'm going to start F minor on position 3. So here it is. I'll start with this one. Let me actually start on the higher fret because I think that will give me more option. So with F minor, I have the first inversion. Now a nearby G minor could be a root position, but also the first inversion is viable there too, but let me stick with root position. From here, a nearby C minor would be a second inversion. And here's with some groove. Moving on to the next string set, I have F minor, root position. I'll go ahead and move up to the G minor, root position as well. And a nearby C minor would be a second inversion. Here's with the groove. Moving on to the next string set, I have F minor, second inversion. G minor, second inversion as well. And C minor would be a first inversion. Here's with the groove. So that covers section A, and moving on to section B, here I am going to pick position 3 for A flat major and work around from there. So let's check it out. Okay, I have A flat major. This will be my first inversion. Okay, a close by C minor will be a root position. And let me go down to B flat major, root position. And a G minor, first inversion. Here's with the groove. Okay, moving on to the next string set. I'll start with root position A flat major. Then a C minor, second inversion. Then a B flat major, second inversion. Then G minor, this will be a root position. Okay, with some groove, here's what it sounds like. Okay, moving on to the next string set, I have A flat major, starting with second inversion. A nearby C minor would be a first inversion. Then the next one would be B flat, first inversion. And finish with G minor, second inversion. And with some groove, here it is. And last string set, starting with A flat major, first inversion. C minor, root position. B flat, root position as well. And nearby G minor triad would be a first inversion. Here's with the groove. that covers all the vertical mapping of the triads that we'll be using for this lesson. And especially if you're new, this is probably a lot for you. So make sure you go through each one, small chunks at a time, and the chances are you won't be able to get familiar with all the neighborhoods right away. So use this as a reference for later on to come back to help you guide through the voice leading. And let me remind us, in each position, walk through the chords first, then you're going to follow the chord progression, both section A and section B, while staying in that particular neighborhood you have chosen. For the right hand, feel free to use arpeggio to help you internalize the intervals, or you could hybrid pick for articulation and dynamic balance. That's your complete framework for practicing minor triads. Just to recap, you will be walking through each chord individually, then connect them in chord progression order through voice leading. You'll be doing this both horizontally across string sets and then vertically through positions. Here, don't rush to play along yet with the backing track. Make sure you could internalize each triads first on your fretboard. The play along videos are there for when you're ready to put everything in time with the track.